equity in our industry. Please remember that no photography or video recording is allowed inside the studio. However, we are live streaming the conference to our website and YouTube channel. Please do tweet about our session using the hashtags on the screen behind me, and let's keep the conversation going with our online audience. At the start of each conference day, we like to make some acknowledgements that ground us here in this place and remind us of the support that we are so fortunate to receive. It's an honour for me to pay my respects to the original keepers of the land, the Mississaugas of New Credit, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. Thank you for hosting us here today and for hosting TIFF year-round. I would also like to thank our tremendous sponsors and supporters who make everything TIFF does possible. Our lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oréal Paris, and Visa, and our major industry supporters, the Ontario Media Development Corporation and Telefilm Canada, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. Sweden's film industry is responsible for the international hits As It Is in Heaven, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo trilogy, and Let the Right One In. But when Anna Serner took over as CEO of the Swedish Film Institute 6 years ago, she determined there was a problem. Not enough women were making films. Anna Serner set an ambitious target that 50% of Swedish films would be made by women by 2020. In doing so, she has transformed her industry into a world leader for gender equity. 64% of Swedish features were directed by women last year, and now Canada, Ireland, Norway, and Australia have introduced their own targets. Before joining the Swedish Film Institute, Anna Serner was Managing Director of the Swedish Media Publishers Association, where she spoke about freedom of speech and the media's role in society. She was also CEO of the Advertising Association of Sweden and is a lawyer and copyright expert. Our interviewer today is Wendy Mitchell, who is a film program manager at the British Council in London, as well as contributing editor and the Nordic correspondent for Screen International, where she served as editor-in-chief for 2 years. Wendy Mitchell has been a staff writer and editor at Entertainment Weekly, IndieWire, and Rolling Stone magazine. So before I ask Anna to come on stage, we're just going to roll a clip, please. Let's give a very warm welcome to Anna Serner.
Thank you. I'm really proud of those films. You didn't see, maybe you didn't understand it because it was in Swedish, but that was the premieres this fall of in the Swedish theaters. Those are 28 long films, long feature or long documentaries, and for the first time ever, it was 14 made by women and 14 made by men. And out of them, we have one winner of the Sundance Film Festival this year. We have one winner of the Cannes Film Festival this year. We have the opening film of Toronto International Film Festival. And actually 3 out of those films are screened here this year. And for me, that shows that what we are actually working with is not only gender equality, but we are actually working with quality. And that is what I'm really want to talk to you about, is how do we measure quality and what does it mean for the whole industry? When you talk about gender equality, it's always like, so do you want to pick a film with a female director, or do you want to pick a quality film? Which means that if you do the quota thing, it will always suffer from, oh, but you were the quota money, which was not the quality money. So we didn't do the quota. But what we did was that we really started to say, we want to achieve gender equality, and we will all have to help. The industry needs to help us. And if the industry does not help us reach this target, I'm not afraid of quotas. Because I really don't believe in the idea of that there is one sex that has the quality genes and the other one didn't for some sort of reason. So if you have a strong belief that there is something wrong here, when I started my job over the past 6 years, 2006 to 2012, we had funded 26% women. That would mean that more than 2 times as many men had the quality genes, and the rest were like, yeah, something happened there. So we did an action plan, and you have been introduced to that one, which means that we did actually go from talk to walk. We set the target, we had an action plan with 5 actions, and we gave it a budget, which is really, really important. We have been throwing money onto men for all these years, not even questioning it, and now we have just to start to do some new type of budgeting and let the new emerging filmmakers get a chance as well. So what do we mean when we talk about quality? We have actually said, a short introduction more than what you heard. I'm a lawyer. I was in film school. I realized I would never get the chance to do films because I was not cool enough or something. I'm working on that now, so I may sort of raise a little bit. But I really realized, I have to line up for years to be able to cook coffee in a shoot. So I wasn't prepared to do that. By doing that, I came into my office as a lawyer 25 years ago, doing the film, and our commissioners, the decision makers, propose films for us to fund. And we fund like 15, 18 long feature films a year in Sweden. And, they write their suggestion and describe why is this a quality film? Because everyone, some of you are maybe filmmakers, so you are up to others to do the selection, but the rest of us actually do selection all the time. And we do the selection, I would say we should do the selection, every one of us, out of the word quality and nothing else. So our commissioners, they wrote suggestions explaining why was this a great film. And it was a lot of words, fantastic characters. We never heard the story before. I could feel immediately this was something special. I never seen it, blah, blah, blah. And I never understood what the real thing was. So we started to actually put words on it, and I now push all the commissioners to have to explain these 3 words. So they have to explain why this particular film idea has relevance, originality, and craft. And that could be very different between different films, of course, but if we talk about relevance or urgency, if it's a comedy, you know, if it's not touching on some contemporary things in society, no one will laugh. If it's an art house film, you need the relevance, which is probably more of into the society of other levels, but you really need to explain what is this relevance right now? Why should we put at least 1 or 2 million Canadian dollars into one film if it has nothing to do with what's on? It can be a historic film, but you still need to put it into today's society. The word originality, that can be that you never heard the story before, which is very rare because everyone tells the same story about love and life and growing up and falling in love and losing someone. So the stories are usually not very original. The originality is usually the perspective, the take on it, or maybe actually who is telling the story. There are films right now that are made of women that you can sense it immediately that you never seen this perspective before. I saw it on the short films block 2, go see it. There is a fantastic, of course, Swedish short there, push it. But there was as well a film which is called Milk. And that was a perspective of getting pregnant that only a woman who does not want to get pregnant could tell, probably. Or we've heard the perspective of getting pregnant from a male perspective, and that is not very original. That one we heard before. So you have to explain what is the originality in this film. And the last is more of the craft. Do we believe in the director? Do we believe in the cinematographer? Do we find the set fine? Is there a budget? Do we believe that our money will reach an audience? Because that is really what it's all about. We want to reach an audience, wherever it is. But a film that has no relevance, and we've heard it before, and no plan for reaching the audience, then you're lost. And then, funnily enough, when you start scrutinizing these proposals, I never say no when they are ready for a decision. But earlier in the process, when you have to describe these, it's an amazing character stuff. When you start scrutinizing that, some male projects go away, and some female projects turns out to have quite much of relevance and originality, which means that we actually talk about the project. We don't talk about the gender, because the gender falls into the shadow when you start talking about the project with words that is more than only, I loved it, I fell in love with it. You should fall in love, but not that easy. So, this is how we work at the Swedish Film Institute. We have this is the success chart, or the Swedish cross, like the Germans call it. And if you see if I can, yeah, here it is. This is the quality index of critics' reviews. We have 15 sources of the biggest newspapers, the biggest broadcasters, and whatever, radio. And we add on festival points for how important the festival is, if you're in competition or if you're in one of the side sections. You get different amounts of points adding on. And this is admissions in the theaters. And this is if you're average. But of course, this is a very old way of measuring if you reach an audience. And we know that, but you all know that Netflix doesn't reveal their numbers. It's a hard time to understand if films actually reaches audiences or not. But we are working on that, and I would love your help in this. So what we say is not that every film should aim for that or that or that. We say that we have different goals. Oh, sorry, there. The A goal is a film that may not have a big audience in the theaters, maybe though online or somewhere else, but has a relevance and originality, which means it travels. That it has both the Swedish critics in its back, but the international arena. The more urgent, the more relevant, the more original, the more common it is for the whole world to actually want to talk about it and see it, because it touches on something that we have in common. And if a film is having a success abroad, it can get more of an attention back home. So it's a double thing. Of course, we want those films that have very high points travel over there, so you both reach a big audience in the cinemas. I mean, in Sweden, this is considered large. We have 10 million population. So this is, of course, the most fantastic corner, and we now, of course, this year hope that Borg will get there. We want the Square to get there. But we actually have Same Blood here, which was a very art-housey movie, but it has traveled around the world and reached audience all over the places and in Sweden. Of course, you can end up here. That means no one liked it. And that could be considered a very bad idea. But of course, we need to have films failing because we need to take risk. But we shouldn't take too much risk. Right now, we have like 16% of the films that we funded ending up down here. And that is fine. Maybe we could go up to 20, I don't know. And one important thing is that women should be allowed to be down here as well, to take risks and having people believing in them, but sometimes you fail. This corner is actually another corner which is problematic. That one is the critics didn't like it, but the audience liked it. So, of course, in the same way, you should have the ambition to end up here. Sometimes it's okay to be there. And of course, you should be able to fail even down here at the D position. But this position, and of course that position, is very bad for the Swedish brand of Swedish film. We want the Swedish audience to want to buy a new ticket, to want to see Swedish film, and not only see American film, which we do, 70%. So to reach those goals, we are actually, of course, there are a lot of strategies, like we have to have a talent support, we have to get education, but really we have these three strategies. One strategy is that to be very clear in what do we consider quality to be. The second is, if not everyone is allowed to be believed in and make their films, we don't believe that we will reach the best quality. And I think this year's Swedish repertoire on the cinemas really show that, because everyone in Sweden shaped up. And of course they shape up of different reasons. They want to survive, they want to make their film, but they really, before they thought they knew how to get our money. And then I came into the picture and I said, I don't find that you have been selecting the quality. You have been selecting gender, male gender. And I said, that's not good enough. We have to find the quality. Everyone goes, of course, really scared, upset, provoked, hopeful. We still give 90% no. So the competition has sharpened, of course, because there are more people eligible to get our money. And that means that everyone needs to shape up. And now we get more ambitious projects because they realize they won't get the money otherwise. And they actually sometimes, of course they still do sometimes, but it's more common now that we see more ambitious films. So the industry, of course, needs us to be out there saying, come on, you can do better, this is not good enough, you will not get your money. It means that they will work harder and it will take even longer time, and it's very frustrating, of course, for everyone because they need the money to survive. But we are not in the survival business, unfortunately. We are in the film business, and we need to get our taxpayers' money reach an audience. And if we don't work with gender equality and diversity, we will not get the perspectives that appeals to everyone in Sweden. We do see a lot of films. There are a lot of films still from male white people, but now perspectives from the female people. And we have to work much harder to include people that comes from other parts of the world, have other cultural backgrounds, that live in Sweden and actually see our society from other perspectives. 15 years ago, we had 10% of our population that had other cultural backgrounds. And in the bigger cities now, in just 15 years' time, we are up to 40%. They are economical refugees, they are war refugees, and they are just people that want a better life. And they are not integrated in our society yet, but they do live in our society, and we get the reflections from media about those ones, the ones that causes a lot of trouble, the Trump version of how they create violence and insecurity in the society. And as long as they can't tell their own story, we will get there. That one perspective of watching other people instead of engaging other people. And we have seen some examples now in Sweden when people with other cultural backgrounds tell their stories, and it's normal stories. They are normal people, they live in the same society, just from another perspective, and we want to learn, and we want to understand them, because then we understand ourselves more. Yeah, I'm heading up to what were the effects of not only the films that we have now here or the films that we have in the other international festivals. This is the Guldbagge Award, a very famous Swedish Oscar, which we hand out every year. In the period of 2010 and 2016, 54% of all awards, I mean, there are more awards, but the one that are really in the quality business of films, directing, screenwriting, and producers, were handed to women. I think that proves that the idea that we can't give more money to women because we have to think about the quality, we can take that argument away. And what about the international festival? This is 2015 and 2017, and I've picked only the most important festivals, counting, this is both shorts and long films. And you can see that we have a population of 10 million people. We have so many films in these festivals all year after year after year. And we've actually, the past 5 years in Sweden, we have never had as many films on the top international film festival before. And more than half of them, you can see this, when you count together, it's actually, when you get all the counting done, it is actually more or less 50-50. The women are invited to the festivals as well, and they are doing just great. And that shows that we are on the right track, and women really can show that the quality lies within them as well, and not only within the men. And we love Toronto, that has this year 6 films, last year 5 films, the year before 6 films, 80% women. So I would say that what we do is really a work for quality, and everyone has the potential to be a filmmaker doing the greatest films, as long as we just consider them. So that's our story.
Hello, everybody. I know I have lots of questions after that, and I'm sure you do too, so we're going to leave plenty of time for your questions at the end, so start thinking of them, please. My first question is, I was lucky enough to meet you several years ago in Cannes when you had hit this gender equality figure, I think maybe 3 years ago or something.
2014,
yes.
Yeah.
And my first thought was skeptical.
Yeah?
Was, oh, she's saying it's not a quota, but it must really be a quota, because how else do you hit this? And you've explained a bit why it's not a quota.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm wondering, if you have this target, isn't there something, maybe a bias, even unconscious amongst the commissioners to say, well, our boss says we're going to hit this target, so maybe we need to be looking at if the director is male or female, and we're saying it's about quality, but do you think there's a bias towards helping women? And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, I mean, of course, just putting up the target there means that you have to work in a new way, and that is not even unconscious bias. That is for real,
Yeah.
And that's the point in having targets. And that meant that both the industry realized that our money were looking for women, and that the same day I was appointed, more or less, but when we launched the action plan, which was in early 2012, and I said this is our target, and if you don't help us, we will do quota, or I'm not afraid of quota. All the female filmmakers started to get phone calls from the production companies. So the production companies started to find women that suddenly had something. And our commissioners got more applications with women, and they looked to them, on them, in a new way. They really had to, they didn't love it in the beginning, because they were so used to what was quality that they had to force themselves to find quality. But the interesting thing is, when you start talking about projects, you and out from wordings and not only gut feeling, then you can feel the energy when it's for real. On the opposite from when it was only falling in love,
Right.
which is, we fall in love with stereotypes. That's what we are doing, unfortunately. Me too.
Yeah. And obviously there was probably some pushback or some criticisms, either made publicly or whispers in the corridors. I mean, how did you cope with that? Is there still pushback from people sort of grumbling, saying, well, why can't, I'm a man, I should deserve the money too?
Yeah.
Which obviously 50% of them are men, so it's fine.
Yeah.
But is there some pushback?
Oh, yeah. It's a lot of, since this international attention, it's a totally other climate, because suddenly sometimes you need people abroad to say, hey, look, that looks good. And you feel proud, instead of feeling that things are changing and
Change is scary.
Change is scary. So that is really, but I mean, the pushbacks from the beginning was really that the legacy I took over was a system where we had funded a lot of men, and we got a system where our commissioners, one part of our money was an automatic scheme, so the commissioners couldn't do the quality check. And when all these films came onto the theaters, the numbers dropped significantly. And that is what everyone is talking about, the market share, how many goes to cinema. They didn't see that we were doing really well in the international festival area. So everyone came, and they really did, came to me and said, not everyone, but you hear the loudest voices. And they came and they said, "You are losing focus, Anna. You only do the gender equality and diversity stuff. Look at the numbers in the theaters. They prove that you are out of focus and you don't have a strategy." I even had one person from my board, a woman, sitting in national broadcast television on a taped recording. When I was sitting in the sofa being interviewed, suddenly they said, "So, yeah, but you get a lot of criticism, Anna." I said, "Yeah, I mean, it's a part of my job to be criticized. And if you couldn't live with that, you can't have my job." But I was very surprised when they said, "Here are the voices from the industry." And they have picked like 5 of the major producers and one of my board members saying that she's out of it, she has no control, she's totally losing focus. That was a very hard pushback. That was kind of the dip. But then it was too much. People realized that is not really the truth. So then it started to turn, and we got to change the automatic system so we could do the quality check. So things started to improve. But this was like in 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it's tapered off a little bit now that...
Yeah. And got a new board.
Yes, okay. Good plan.
Yeah.
But, we're talking about, the Swedish admissions as being only one piece of that puzzle. And we see this in the UK too, that you can get films that get 5-star reviews, and there was a film directed by a woman that was in Cannes and 5-star reviews, and nobody went to see it. Do you need audience development to go alongside this, to sort of train the audience that they need to see new voices? Or do you think that's more innate?
Well, I mean, it's a really complex thing to change audiences' behavior. But I think the only thing we can have to do is to concentrate on that every project needs to be ambitious. And every project needs to aim for A or B. And otherwise, when the audience buys a ticket, they are now quite expensive. And they buy a ticket and they are like, yeah, maybe amused a little bit, but it's nothing that they would say, wow, Swedish film, that's great, I want to see the next one. So we need to work on every project. And in my opinion, there are, I'm sorry to say, all directors out there, very few directors have the star quality that you go see the film just because of the director. You go see the film because people start talking about it. Sami Blood is a very good example. No one heard about Amanda Charnel because that was her first film. But the talking started going because it's a good film. And then it grows. But we need the cooperation with the distributors that sometimes don't want to put a lot of effort in all filmmakers, and the theaters that are very... I mean, we have one film in Sweden showing right now, Super Swede. Yeah. It's about a Formula One...
Race car.
A race car driver. He was big in the 70s. And he had his male bonding people in the film. And it's really a nostalgia trip, which is, even for me, I remember him really well, because he crashed and died, and it was a big disaster, and 2 out of 3 racers died at that time. So it was this very special moment. But it's a film about cars and men and the male bonding, and that was put up in 200 theaters. And then you have a film like Sami Blood that from the beginning had 15. And I don't know who will get the most audience or the most admissions, but there is an expectation for, there's a lot of male theater exhibitors. So they see themselves, and then they love Ronnie Peterson, and they love the sports. And suddenly that one was expected to reach big. So we need to get everyone to realize that half of the population are women. Obviously, 40% of the population in the bigger cities in Sweden aren't from Sweden. They have no relation to Ronnie Peterson. What kind of films do we want to talk to with them?
Now, I wanted to bring that up next because you've been mentioning Sami Blood, which was here at TIFF last year and is just a remarkable film. You should all seek it out if you missed it last year. And it's one of the first films told about the Sami people in recent years. You know, that's just, gender is only one part of diversity, as you mentioned in your talk. You know, there's age. You could encourage very young or very old people to direct films. You can, you know, different races, as you mentioned, immigrant stories. How do you, or how does the industry at large encourage, you know, some of those, that 40% of immigrant population, how do you encourage them to submit a film idea to you, to think that they are enabled to do that?
And that's a very good point, that how do we do that? Because we fund only the professionals, as we have limited amount of money, but we really do fund them with a lot of money. So we really need to work with others. So there are all these levels, like it has been with gender equality, but we've done that in Sweden for the past 100 years, which means that there are women in all classes, in all cities. They know the system, they have the network. So we really need to now use our money to encourage all parts of the regional film funds, all production companies, to go out, find the talent. So we are now redoing our support scheme, and we will use our money to actually have conditions. If you don't do that, not in every project, but as a production company, to get our money, you have to show that you have a slate of emerging filmmakers. There is, and that's an interesting about age as well. When are you supposed to make your first film? There is an amazing film here that I saw yesterday from a Norwegian filmmaker, a woman, and help me if I don't... Iram Haq. And What Will People Say? It's a story from her own history. She has Pakistani background and fell in love with a white Norwegian guy, big problem. And she's 41. So, I mean, this is her second film, what I understand. But you could start off when, whatever age. We're so like talents, they should be talent programs for people from 18 to 25. It's like, why? So
I think this is especially important for women who might take a break to raise family, for instance, and might want to direct when they're 50. Why not? You know.
Yeah.
So you're open to that, yes. Do you think Sweden is special? Can this sort of system of quality, could it work anywhere? Is it going to have to be tailored for other markets?
I would say that probably any system would work as long as you stick to it, and it's for real. There is a lot of systems that you sort of throw out and no one takes care of them and follow up and demands. I'm like a bull terrier when I start off. And there's a good thing about that, and that also is, of course, a bad thing about that, because sometimes people feel that we have no space nowadays. It should be open, and that is the considered about culture all over, that it shouldn't have no restraints, no conditions, let the free mind blow. And I'm all for that in every particular film. So every filmmaker should do their story in the best way. And I can, you know, like Ruben Östlund and The Square won the Golden Palm, so yes. I'm very happy with him, and I really like the film. But he's very interested in white, male, middle-class people. Male people. And he's like going so deep. And I love that. And he's kind of stereotyping around it. But let him do his thing, as long as we have other storytellers that can do that with their perspective. The problem is when everyone has the same perspective and dig in, and all the other characters are stereotyped.
Right,
yeah. And that wasn't the answer of the question, which I don't remember now. Can it
go everywhere?
Yeah. So I think, but when I say it took me years to get our commissioners to actually write down these explanations around the words of quality. You can have any word. I think what matters is that there is nothing like a truth of quality when you see it. And if we just question that, you can question it any way you want, but do it. And don't just say that you do it.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about those commissioners. And first of all, what's the split of male-female commissioners?
It's right now we have 7 commissioners. It's 4 women and 3 men.
Okay. Maybe you can talk.
But that's not the. I mean, women are as unconscious biased as men.
Yes, yeah.
And I am as unconscious biased as any other one. Yeah. So you just have to realize that.
I want to go a little bit deeper on this notion of quality and how they describe it. Because you went through the quality, diversity, craft, but especially that line of new perspectives, or how does that look when you write it down? Are they writing like a page?
Yeah, they're
a page.
Writing like 1-2 pages, and they describe the like the relevance or urgency, and like Sami Blood, to keep on to that example because it's a good example. It's the relevance is it's a coming of age film about a young girl in the 30s, and it's relevant today as well because it's about leaving your. I mean, anyone can relate to that. Leaving, even like in this, what will they say? That's a coming of age of a young girl that wants to leave her area, leave that box. And the box can be that you have other culture backgrounds, that you have other political backgrounds. But in this case, it was the Sami background. And the government in Sweden in the 30s were really racist. We did measurement, we measured the skull, the nose.
As if they are
put them
different
in different
species.
schools.
Yeah.
And that's a part of our heritage that we haven't spoken about. And when you see that, you can really feel that this is really burning. And that's the indigenous people's situation in the world is emerging in awareness right now. And that's, of course, why the film has traveled all over the world.
It has this relevance.
Yeah, so what the commissioner we need very, very good commissioners to spot that. And this commissioner really did. She saw the coming of age story, which everyone can relate to, with a special spice of indigenous problem that we have never seen before. So that comes into the originality as well, that that perspective has never been on the screen before. And to have a young female protagonist of coming of age. We've seen so many white boys growing up. And it's time to see how it is growing up as a young woman.
But I think you've also got a film here that's a white boy coming of age, Ravens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's, I don't know if
Not
it's
that it's bad,
coming
because
of
it's
age, but it is a bit, yeah,
It's a
that's true.
white boy, yeah. I mean, how do you ensure that men aren't alienated from all this?
Well, they
These
do
poor
feel,
men, Anna.
yeah,
You have
I know,
to
and
encourage
they
them.
do feel alienated at some point. I actually had this conversation this summer with a writer, very famous male writer in Sweden, and he said that a film director, male, had come to him and said, yeah, you know, and I don't get any money, and the writer said, I'm so sick of their whining, just adapt to the new map. There's a new map. And if you want the money, you have just to realize what does the map tell you. And then he said, but I'm sick of the gender equality as well. It's really, you know, boring. And then I realized, I said, which I have to do from time to time, say, yeah, but you know, we still fund 50% men. I said, yeah, do you? I was like, shit, now again. It's like, you know, women speaking in bigger groups. And then they talk 30% of the time, and they are considered talking 70% of the time. Yeah, it's research about that. So we are not allowed to take place. And it shows that men feel alienated now. And that's not good, but that's no excuse either. They have to adapt. We have had to adapt for all these years. It's just a change. And it goes for diversity as well. I get to hear, how do you foster these millennial kids? They are so taken care of in home, and they are just whining, and they want all for me. And I said, yeah, maybe you should find people in our suburbs that have been going through hard times, that know how to work hard. They have proven that they can work hard. Why do you need to foster the white millennial kids that don't know how to work hard? So go for others. They are there. Everyone has there. You have to foster everyone. So you need to give people the same chance from new perspectives as well.
One thing I've noticed is that even when women are getting funding to make films, a lot of times it's not the same amount of money.
No.
Borg McEnroe here, which I love, encourage you to see that. Film like The Square, those are fairly big budgets for Sweden. Those are directed by men. Are the female directors getting less money?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, in average they aren't actually, but they don't get the big budgets. No. So they
Why
get
is
lesser
that?
money. It's because the production companies still only present male directors. And this is our next very important action. That's 50-50 by 2020 thing is a new action plan, and one big point in that is to get women to get the bigger budgets as well. And it is amazing that it still exists, because we know that female directors get big box office successes, higher ROI on those films, and they are still considered not to be experienced enough. Men are picked on potential, women on experience. You can have a guy who never made a film, he can get the first film a big budget. Like actually Janusz Metz in Borg McEnroe. He had never made a long feature film. Yeah. He made a documentary.
And
but we have
TV.
great documentarists, women, that would never get the chance.
No.
So we need to do that. And that's my message now is, if the industry doesn't start working with us, I'm not afraid of quotas.
Okay.
I think we've shown that they do deliver. So let them.
And before I open it up to some other questions, I wanted to talk about the sustainability of this. And I think one very healthy thing that you've noted to me is that, okay, 1 year it's 64%, I think, last year for women. This year it might be 40%. Like, there's going to be some ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
But overall, is this sustainable forever? Do you have to keep pushing at it, or will it just become effortless?
Unfortunately, it's not sustainable at all, because nothing has really changed. What has changed in Sweden is our money, but we can see the films that we are not involved with, there are no women. And when you start talking to the commercial money, the pure commercial money, they don't give a shit. They want what they expect to be safe. They flop quite a lot. How many men hasn't flopped? But it's still safe. So that's why I'm not leaving my position for a while.
Okay.
And that's why I really, when we do action plans, we have one for gender equality and one for diversity. We have done, well, actually the gender equality one I just did because I had to. I have been speaking too much before my position, so everyone was expecting things. But the diversity plan, it took us 2 years to finalize, and we did it with the whole organization. And we have to remind the organization all the time, because they don't remember now, but they have all action plans, they take step by step. It takes time, so it's a constant work. It doesn't happen like this, unfortunately. The gender equality went fast because there were a professional bunch of female directors out there that just didn't get job. We had been examining given exams for female film students for 1-2 decades already. And the film school had 50-50 for a long time, but they were still not considered good enough. So that was much easier. So everything, you have to be so patient, and you have to get it into the whole organization. But I know for a fact that my previous jobs, I was followed by a female CEO on both my jobs. And the first thing they did, both of them, is throw out what I did because they want to position themselves. It doesn't matter that they are women. So how do we make this normality and not Anna's thing? And it's very much an Anna thing. But the gender equality, I would say, in our organization is it's really in the whole organization. But, you know, a new CEO could say, yeah, but let's not focus on that. Now we are going this way. And then you have to follow.
Yeah, stick around, please.
Yeah, I'm sticking around. That's a bad news for those who don't like me, and there are some. So I'm sorry to say they will have to survive.
Okay. I think it's a good time to open it up for a few questions. Do we have a microphone? Or yes, we do have a microphone. So if we could come to the second row first.
I just want to confirm, when you're speaking about women's films, you're talking about women directors. Is that accurate?
I'm sort of mixing it up. I use female directors as the kind of archetype for female filmmakers, but we do count in other positions. And the other positions are actually script writers right now is a problem, so we have to focus more on that. But producers is more like 65% female producers. So on average, we can use female directors as the archetype.
Right, because I know that there are different models. Australia has something like 3 out of 5, including protagonist and producer and writer and director, and to count as a women's project. And in Canada, that could be a woman producer, woman protagonist, woman writer, woman, and then David Cronenberg as director, right? And it's not a woman's film.
No.
To me.
No.
We have to emphasize women directors, I think.
Yeah, and we have to do that because it's very important to understand that when, for instance, there is a female director, it automatically gets, almost all films passes the Bechdel test. There are interesting protagonists, female protagonists. You get female cinematographers all of a sudden. So a female director usually sort of spreads, while a female producer, it's very common with a female producer only picking men. But it's the opposite. And when you look at if you have other culture backgrounds, the protagonists on screen are allowed, like we did accounting in Sweden, which was very criticized. You have to get used to be very, very criticized when you do things in this area. But we counted the characters on screen and tried to see if you have a culture background otherwise, how many were they and what kind of character would they be playing. So we counted sexual orientation, which is not very easy because you don't have to, if you are homosexual, it shouldn't have to be the theme of the film. You could just be homosexual. And then you don't maybe even know it. But we were counting as well how you look, which is that, and that's a tricky thing. What color of your skin would indicate that you have another culture background? And in all premieres in 2014 of the Swedish films, we had 36% of the films passing the Bechdel test, which is not good enough. Not every film should pass the Bechdel test, but 36%, then we have a problem. We had 7% with the appearance of coming from somewhere else, and they were all criminals.
Oh.
All 100% of all these 7%. Then when you have people behind the camera directing with another culture background, the characters with other colors of their skin are allowed to be people. They have normal lives and they have normal love, and they can be both a woman and gay, and it's not a problem. So it really matters who is behind the camera. And that's why we shouldn't mix. I don't like that when you don't count every position for itself. You can count the protagonists, but don't mix it up with saying it's a female film.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
How do you deal with diversity? Because in Canada, I think it was last year, Carole Brabant from Telefilm, and in conversation, she has said, we can't ask that question.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with it?
Well, this time we didn't ask, we were just watching when we did the counting in 2014. And that is a problem as we are interpreting different things. And we aren't counting because we have the same problem. Some want to be counted, some do not want to be counted. And this Twitter climate debate where the trolls take over debates, it's so uptight, the climate, so it's very hard to do this. But I'm just convinced that we have to count, and we have to find ways of asking, make it voluntarily, make it maybe that you don't have to, I don't know, we just have to do it. Because if we don't know the situation now, we don't know how to change, and we don't know how to follow. But it's very controversial.
Is there another question out there, or I can ask some more? No? Oh, right.
Hello. I would like to know something more about the distributors, Swedish distributors. So, did you notice a change in the attitude of the Swedish distributors concerning these movies that you are supporting? And if you can tell me something more about the cooperation.
Yeah, where to begin? That is a problem, and we had a very interesting situation when one part of our action plan was to educate the female directors, not in directing. There's a lot of programs that sort of training for female directors, as they need more training. They just need to get the work. But in this, we gave them training in actually feminism. How is the structures? How can you get your idea from idea through all gatekeepers, distributors, producers, if we're talking female directors, out to the audience? And distributors are really one gatekeeper. So the 15 female directors that was in the program got to meet first producers, the main producers in Sweden, and then the main distributors in Sweden. And the producer said, but you know, we can't do anything about gender equality because it's the distributors that decide. So they don't, you know, we have to give them what they want. And then we met the distributors and said, but you know, we can't do anything about gender equality because we only take what we get. So they were blaming each other. And when we said that, they were like, oh, are we? They said, yeah, and we can throw a program for you too, because obviously you need it. And then they say, no, but you know, I'm really busy. And that is so interesting. There are so many men as well coming to me and saying, why don't you throw a program for us? And now I learned, so I say, yeah, I do that. Are you the first one signing up? Not right now, because they're not signing up. And so the market people are very not aware, and we have to work with them, more or less.
Yeah. Is it the same with exhibition? Because they seem to be really old-fashioned in most parts of the world.
Yeah,
the cinemas.
That's why they love.
They're blaming. Oh, that's only what the distributors are.
Yeah.
Us.
Yeah. I mean, and frankly, in Sweden, they are. We have a problem with one dominant, and they are, of course, very professional in many ways, but it's run by men. Mm. And then we have all these single theaters out in Sweden, and they are many, and they are almost like 70%, I would say, are men above 60. Mm. And of course, they choose what they believe in, and they are unconscious biased. Mm. If there were only 25-year-old women, they would not choose the films that actually half of the population would want to see either. So that's why you need the different angles. Mm.
Is there a way to encourage more female voices to become executives or run a cinema, work in distribution, female or diverse, people from diverse backgrounds?
Yeah, that might be one way. And I think as well that the exhibitors now starts to realize, like Sami Blood went really well, and we have other films that are made by women that are doing really well. And I hope if we are resilient that they learn that look of the film and not on the gender, but they need education.
Is there another question? Yes, great. It's Kathleen.
Hi, I was interested in the paradigm that you laid out, the chart that you presented, where you talked about how you determined success being around cultural impact, the number of admissions at the box office, and then critical acclaim and awards and international festival exposure. But frequently, films have their local distribution deal as part of their financing, and you don't get much return on investment in your home territory. So I'm just curious why you don't have international sales and return on investment also as a factor for success.
We would love to have that, but it's very, very hard for us to get the figures out of the international sales. They don't reveal it to us, and it takes a very long time. But I believe that we could actually make conditions now that if we don't get the numbers, they don't get our support. But of course, the international sales agencies, they have a lot of films to choose between. And if there is one film, which happens to be Swedish, that has that condition, maybe they won't choose that. And that would be as well counterproductive for our films to reach an audience internationally. So it's, but we really would want to get those numbers, to have a more of a culture impact, as we want our films to travel. But it's hard.
Even without the specific numbers, I mean, something like Sami Blood, do you know how many territories that's sold to put you on the spot? Or films like that?
That we do
You know.
Yeah, that, but we don't know how much they were sold for.
Right.
So, and that's a big difference.
Yes.
But of course, like Borg now has been sold to 132 countries, in kind of territories, I don't know, but that's good.
Yes.
Yeah. And
And
I
the
mean,
Square will
Sami
have
Blood,
sold
and
to
it's-
tons. And,
yeah, Square was sold for, I don't know about the Square actually,
Okay.
but I was talking about Force Majeure now. But Sami Blood, I think, has been sold to like 30, 40 countries, which is good.
Yes.
But maybe for nothing sometimes. So that is the expectation of box office in the country.
Okay. Was there another question over here? Oh, and then coming to you next. Yeah.
I just had a question about women who are directing for television, because a lot of this focuses on feature films. So if you can, in feature films, judge a project by like the relevance, the originality, from the perspective of a representative, like I work for an agency that represents female directors, if a woman is being submitted to direct for television, what are the criteria that we can emphasize? Because it's not necessarily their project, they're being hired, a hired director. So do you have any advice for that kind of situation?
Yeah, I think what everyone can do is go to the broadcasters and ask them what numbers they have. Do they count? How many female directors are there? So you can make, a push. Not even in Sweden, the public service broadcaster has a target. They tell us that's great you do the gender equality, but we go for quality. And it's like, yeah, and you said it's great that we, so that is one thing of doing it. And the other is, I think we could all ask more relevant questions to decision makers, like, what are you looking for? And could you specify what you're looking for? So we can say that we could argue instead of saying, yeah, but we want someone with a special touch. It usually gets down to very blurry explanations. And I think we are too scared to actually question the decision makers.
Question here?
Yeah. Oh, so
Woke us up.
Welcome.
it's a follow-up to what that gentleman just said. I had a friend of mine. We're like independent novice, but we know the biz and everything. But the main thing was we had a great idea that's never been done before, using like immersive technology and TV and video. And they said the same thing. Oh, we don't see it this way, and everything's there. The technology's there, but for some reason, we're not on the same page. And I just said, listen, I respect who you are as a traditional broadcaster. I said, listen, the world's gone online, whatever you want to say, immersive technology, and pretty much just laughed out of the room. So,
Was there a question to that?
yeah, it's basically us having this great idea using the new technology to someone who didn't see us on the same page. And my best friend, she's a woman producer, independent. We just pretty much like laughed out of the room.
Yeah.
So it's like it's very frustrating when you're trying to, change the paradigm shift and people don't see the same way. So I just
And I think the frustration we all share, and it's important to remember ourselves that it actually now is improving. Not for everyone all the time, definitely not. Otherwise, the figure would look really different. But in just 1 year time or 2 years time, like the Telefilm in Canada, they have a clear target. Sodec in Canada, a clear target. I mean, Canada is an amazing country. I think it's Trudeau effect and maybe anti-Trump effect.
Can we clone him?
So
Yes.
if we can thank Trump for something, we can thank him for that. But it really, I mean, things are changing slowly. But to not fall into the frustration hole, to say that it's, if we are just patient and fighters.
Yes. And we're running out of time, sadly, but 2020, has any of your targets gotten bigger and bolder since you've already been having some of the success? What's going to happen between now and 2020 at Swedish Film Institute?
We have more women doing the big budgets, and we will have a greater diversity both on screen and behind the camera, besides gender. And we are expecting that our numbers reflect how big population or the diversity in the population looks like. It should be more or less there. We have 50-50 men, women, actually 52% women, I think, in the world. And if we are now in Sweden 20-25% with other culture backgrounds, that would reflect. And with different sexual orientation, we should see more stories, LGBT stories, because we need to hear them.
But you think it's very achievable to have 50-50 funding for men and women, 2020? You think that's going to...
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Oh, yes. We are not giving up on that.
Okay.
No.
Great. I'm so glad, Toronto thinks you're a mogul, because you are. Thank you for coming and for your smart questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anna, thank you so much for your determination, your passion. You always come here and inspire us. And everyone in the room, please share the live stream with your friends. Everything's online too. Watch it again. There is a lot of good stuff that was spoken about here today. Let's go make some great films, everybody. Thank you.